tragic day in court, sentencing of Dylan Schumaker. It was a heart-wrenching day in court as a young man faced the consequences of a horrific act. Dylan Schumaker, at just 17 years old, stood in front of a packed courtroom, where he learned his fate after beating one of his girlfriend's son, 23-month-old Austin Smith, to death. But why he did do all of this? All because the child wouldn't stop crying. Schumaker, visibly shaken, began to cry the moment he entered the courtroom. His tears flowed as he apologized repeatedly, pleading to the victim's mother, asking for forgiveness.
I didn't mean to kill Austin. Ashley, I really didn't. I really think I did that. I didn't mean to hurt him.
But despite his apologies, the horrific details could not be ignored. On that tragic day in March, 23-month-old Austin Smith, too young to even defend himself, lost his life at the hands of someone who should have cared for him. Schumaker's defense attorney fought for the minimum sentence, arguing that his client lacked the experience to handle babysitting and struggled to control his emotions.
Smith was completely defenseless. That's a given. But there were other dynamics at work there, including my client's inability to either control his anger or frustration and his inexperience in babysitting.
Attorney Joseph Terranova claimed the crime wasn't intentional, calling it a situational outburst rather than a calculated act. But the judge, Msir William Baller, was unmoved by this argument. He called Schumaker a manipulator, referencing a phone call Schumaker made to his mother while in custody, where he claimed to his mother that he was just a 16-year-old. All he had to do was cry in court and everything would be fine.
Will show that you admitted that on July 23, 2013, in a phone call to your mother from the holding center, you stated, and I got a quote from the court reporter, "I am a 16-year-old blonde. Probably all I have to do is cry in front of the jury and they're going to feel sorry for me," end quote.
The judge emphasized that Dylan Schumaker caused immense pain and grief to many people at the age of 17. He received letters from 13 individuals describing how the crime affected them. Judge Baller sentenced Dylan Schumaker to 25 years to life, ensuring justice for the innocent child who was taken too soon. Schumaker's attorney plans to appeal the sentence, but for the family of Austin Smith, the pain and loss will never be undone. That was the tragic story of Dylan Schumaker and his sentencing. Now moving on to another heartbreaking case that shook the nation, the sentencing of Aiden Fucci. Unlike the last one, this was a cold and calculated murder of Tristan Bailey. In what has been called one of the most shocking and devastating cases in St. Johns County, Florida, Aiden Fucci stood in court to hear his fate for the murder of 13-year-old Tristan Bailey. The brutal crime sent shockwaves through the community. The case presented to the court was unlike any other, with 114 stab wounds inflicted on the victim, including 49 defensive wounds. It was clear Tristan fought for her life. She was fully aware of the attack, trying desperately to defend herself against someone she trusted. But this wasn't over. 35 wounds to her head and neck, 29 to her back and shoulders, and 6 fatal wounds. Judge R. Lee Smith, who presided over the case, expressed that the brutality of this murder was far beyond anything the court had ever seen.
I would submit that this case is probably the most difficult and shocking case that this county, in St. Johns County, has dealt with. In the 20 years that I have been, or 16 years that I have been practicing law, and the 30 years that I have lived and worked in this, all of Northeast Florida, this case.
At just 14 years old, Aiden Fucci lured Tristan Bailey into the woods under false pretenses, someone she trusted. Once there, Fucci committed an unthinkable act of premeditated violence. What's even more chilling, Fucci had expressed his desire to kill someone days before the murder. In conversations with his girlfriend and friends, Fucci said he wanted to kill someone just to see what it felt like. He planned to stab his victim in the woods and run away to avoid capture so he could, in his words, keep killing. The murder weapon, a knife Fucci nicknamed Poker, was used for this violent personal crime. This wasn't a random attack, but one that was deliberate and premeditated, designed to satisfy Fucci's desire to watch someone bleed out. Judge Smith acknowledged the magnitude of this crime, describing it as heinous, atrocious, and cruel. Fucci's actions were cold, calculated, and without any moral or legal justification. The court noted that this was not a crime of passion, revenge, or anger. There was no motive, only a desire to kill. Fucci's defense argued that his age and immaturity played a role, but Judge Smith firmly disagreed. The judge found no signs of impulsiveness or lack of understanding of the consequences. Fucci meticulously planned every aspect of the crime and even tried to cover it up by disposing of evidence. In the end, the court found Fucci guilty of the first-degree murder of Tristan Bailey and sentenced him to life in prison. Due to his age, Fucci will be eligible for a sentence review after 25 years, but this cold and calculated crime ensures that justice has been served. But for the family of Tristan Bailey, the pain and loss from this senseless act will remain forever. The next one is the sentence of Carly Gregg, a case that carried its own weight of controversy and emotion. Carly Gregg, standing in the court, is only 15 years old, but has been sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Charged as an adult, Carly was convicted of killing her mother and attempting to murder her stepfather. This case has shaken the community and raised questions about juvenile justice, mental health, and the nature of evil. On the day of the verdict, Carly stood before the court, tears in her eyes, as the jury delivered their decision. The details of Carly's crime are nothing short of horrifying. Prosecutors presented home surveillance footage that showed Carly walking through her house with something concealed behind her back. That something was later revealed to be a .357 Magnum handgun. After entering, she shot her mother 3 times, then sat calmly in the kitchen. But it didn't end there. Carly used her mother's phone to text her stepfather, luring him back to the house. When he arrived, she attempted to shoot him as well, but he managed to wrestle the gun away and called 911. Carly's defense team argued that she was suffering from a mental health crisis at the time of the crime. They claimed she was depressed, hearing voices, self-harming, and struggling with an eating disorder. However, a court-appointed psychiatrist testified that Carly did not meet the legal standard for insanity. The jury was not convinced by the defense's argument. The home surveillance footage showing her calculated actions, such as hiding the gun behind her back, attempting to destroy evidence, and even inviting a friend over after the murder, suggested that Carly knew exactly what she was doing. They painted a picture of a cold, premeditated killer who was aware of her actions and their consequences. They highlighted how Carly texted her stepfather from her mother's phone asking, "When are you coming home?" with the clear intention to lure him into her deadly trap. Despite being a victim of Carly's actions, her stepfather testified in court, showing his deep conflict. During his testimony, he mouthed the words, "I love you," to Carly, a moment that captured the complexity of the family's tragedy. In the end, the jury convicted Carly of first-degree murder, sentencing her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Carly's lawyers have already announced plans to appeal the verdict, arguing that she was too young to receive such a harsh sentence. This case leaves many unanswered questions. Was Carly truly evil, or was she a troubled young girl caught in the grip of a mental health crisis? While the jury made their decision, the emotional toll on the family and the community continues to linger. For justice was served as Julio Caesar Rivera was sentenced to 45 years in prison, marking the end of his violent crime spree and the beginning of a decades-long confinement. Rivera was led out of district court, facing a future behind bars after being convicted in a series of armed carjackings. His most notable crime was a failed carjacking attempt in November 2021, where he shot Alana Castaneda in the face. Despite the horrifying encounter, Castaneda expressed relief after hearing the lengthy sentence. She said, "As soon as they said it was 45 years, I just started crying. It's not just for me, it's for the other victims as well." In 3 of these cases, including Castaneda's, he pleaded guilty, which helped reduce his potential sentence. Despite his admission, Rivera's actions left a trail of pain and fear. In court, he admitted that he had been influenced by a friend who suggested stealing a car for human smuggling. Still, his family pleaded for leniency, citing his troubled upbringing. Rivera grew up without his biological mother and had fallen in with the wrong crowd. But for Castaneda, those reasons didn't erase what he had done. Castaneda, who survived the brutal attack, now carries permanent scars and has already undergone 3 surgeries, with another still ahead. Despite Rivera's apology in court, where he said, "I'm not the same person I was 2 years ago and I've prayed every day for forgiveness," Castaneda found it hard to accept. She reflected on the moment, saying, "Yes, I was listening to him, but at the same time it's like, you did what you did." Rivera's sentence stands as a reminder that actions have consequences, regardless of circumstances. His victim, Alana Castaneda, can now find some sense of closure, knowing that justice was done not only for herself but also for the other victims of Rivera's violence.